Hey folks, welcome back to Garza, Gaitan, and the Game, where we analyze play-by-play all things going on in politics, in the game of politics specifically. We're back with Daniel Garza and myself, Wadi Gaitan. We got an exciting show today. We're gonna be talking about several things going on this week, including the deportees from El Tren de Aragua that arrived in El Salvador, arrived in the hands of Bukele. There was a judge who gave an order trying to halt it. We're going to talk about the ins and out of that. We're also going to look at the case of Khalil, the student from Columbia University, who is in the process of possibly being deported, but a big back and forth on can someone who's a green card holder, no longer a student visa, but green card holder, be subject to deportation? What does the law say in this place? But also, what is just the message that Trump might be sending in this place? So we're here with Daniel Garza. Garza, how's your week going so far?
Oh man, trying to pull myself away from the March Madness games. Yeah, Gonzaga's up, so that's good. As long as my team is up, all good, Wadi.
All right, in Maryland, we were ranked number 4. Even though probably very naive on my end, I do have them going all the way. I got to cheer for the alumni for my school, so I'm not going to back away from it. I'm sticking with my pick, and I'm hoping we're going to make it all the way. We'll see.
It's gonna be Maryland versus Gonzaga at the end, baby.
There you go. There you go. All right, I love it.
That's the game.
Daniel, let's jump right into it. I actually want to start with reading something from the Wall Street Journal, talking about Khalil. And, we know in the news that he's been obtained by ICE. What was a surprise for many people is that he was sort of seen by many just as a student visa holder, but he is now a green card holder. If I'm not mistaken, when many of the protesters were happening and he was very sort of visible, he was someone who only had a student visa. He's now married to a U.S. citizen. If I'm not mistaken, November last year is where he got his green card. So I wanted to start by
reading his marriage, by the way. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Through his marriage.
Through his marriage, correct. Through his marriage. The Wall Street Journal has an opinion article on this, and they talk about how a green card comes with legal obligations, including the disavowal of terrorism. Under 8 USC 1182, an alien is inadmissible if he or she endorses or espouses terrorist activity or persuades others to move in this space. Inadmissible, in what the Wall Street Journal was saying, doesn't just, it includes people who are trying to come in and trying to become either visa holders or green card holders, but also includes those who are current green card holders. In other words, Wall Street Journal is making the case that even someone who's a legal permanent resident, if they engage, it seems that the law is very specific, in terrorist-related either activity or support or the advancement of, is subject under this space. Do you think this is specifically what Trump is looking at? Is this what they're going after?
I mean, I imagine that Trump has spoken with his lawyers and they have advised him that this would comply with the criteria, the specifications of the current law. I would think that he wouldn't act unless he was advised that he could do so. Now, politically is a whole different ballgame. What happens if you do create a low bar on a criteria to begin to expel resident aliens, right? Granted, he got the residency card because of his marriage, but it does come with a bit more strength when it comes to rights than someone who's here undocumented. Of course, it doesn't reach, of course, the level of a citizen, but still, nonetheless, it's no small thing, right, to expel a resident alien. But the question that I would ask, Wadi, is if someone asked for a visa and said that they were a Nazi supporter, and that they would create chaos and riots in our universities in support of Nazism, and go after Jews on school grounds, would you grant them the visa? I sure as hell wouldn't. Now I wouldn't wait for a judge to tell me whether I should do it or not. I would be appalled, at such a thing. So the same applies here. The Khalil case shows a concerted, deliberate campaign to intimidate Jews and opposing voices, by the way, in American institutions, in Columbia University in this case. and to create chaos and division, appropriate school grounds and property, vandalize, and they even held a couple of maintenance personnel crews hostage, I understand, against their will. He's an anti-Semite, flat out. Mahmoud Khalil is a Syrian national who backed his who backed the support of Hamas with action and deeds. This isn't a free speech case. This is action. This is steps that he has taken in support of Hamas. And I'll remind everybody, entre parentheses here, that Hamas not only murdered more than 1,200 innocent young men and women on October 7th, Hamas murdered American hostages that were taken on October 10th, October 7th. They still hold 5 American hostages. So he supports this terrorist group openly, and likely has his whole life. He came here fully planning to continue supporting terrorist organizations like Hamas, and he didn't do anything by accident, Wadi.
What do you think the Trump administration has to do a little bit here? Because look, we can't deny that there's a lot of folks who believe this is politically motivated. It's somewhat, my understanding, unprecedented to remove a legal permanent residence. You laid out the why. You gave how this is a unique
I'm not so
situation.
sure it's unprecedented. I'll remind you that, and I worked in the Bush administration. In fact, I was working for the Bush administration when 9/11 happened in Washington, D.C. I lived 3 blocks from the Pentagon. I still remember very well taking the metro from the Pentagon that morning. It is vivid to me what happened. And let's keep in mind, after 9/11, we found out that all 19 of the terrorist hijackers were here on temporary visas. They were here on legal status, basically. And the only reason why I mentioned that is because the immigration rules and agencies were purposely overhauled to create a much stronger focus on national security over immigrant due process rights. Look, everybody wants to believe that the immigrants have due process, and of course they do, and there are courts established for that kind of things, but it should not override the security of citizens. Again, this is a privilege that is given to somebody to enter the United States of America. It is not a right. You have to earn that right. And Khalil, he's destroyed that right. He's trampled all over it. And so I'll say this too, in the reading that I've been doing, historically, when challenged, the courts have sided with the federal government administration's right to protect national security over due process and transparency. So there is clear information online and on the, like you were talking about, on the Immigration Council website, warning that visa and green card holders of the risks that they face participating in protests, because their rights, including for due process, despite what the posters say or whatever, are not equivalent to those of American citizens.
I definitely get that point, Daniel. Would you say this? So the 9/11 attackers, like you mentioned, were visa holders. I think my point was that it's a little bit unprecedented on the green card holder side. Again, a lot of the rules, like you mentioned, and like we read in the Wall Street Journal right now, they apply to both of these. My point was just a little bit on that. It seems unprecedented. From my knowledge, there could be cases that we're just not as familiar as, where it was
I honestly
green
think
card
that we
holder.
should have a low bar when it comes to acts of terrorism, expressive support of terrorist organizations. I don't mind having a low bar.
Yeah. So my question is a little bit, what does the Trump administration have to do a little bit though? Because again, the reality is there is a battle of narratives right now. There are folks who are sort of concerned about that aspect. There's some folks who believe that this is more of a free speech issue. So this means that there is a level of sort of messaging and or passing on of information that the administration has to do, which I believe that they haven't really done that. It might be maybe because their lawyers said, hey, let this be settled out in the court. Let's not be out there in the public domain battling this out. I mean, what's your take here? Are they waiting for this
Yeah,
to
I mean,
be
look,
ironed in the court, or
I
they
mean,
need to be more
the
vocal
best
on it?
thing they can do is dot their I's and cross their T's on each and every one of those folks that were deported, that were on that plane, the Tren de Aragua people and Khalil Mahmoud, for example. Also, so there's a saying in Spanish, cuando te digo que el caballo es negro es porque tengo los pelos en la mano. right? When I tell you that the horse is black, it's because I have its hairs in my hand.
Mhm.
And so basically the metaphor here is, if I'm telling you he's a terrorist or a terrorist supporter, it's because I have the proof, right? And so they need to spell out what the truth is to the courts. And they also got to tell the courts, especially John Roberts and the Supreme Court, they got to stop playing these games. You got to give us latitude here. You can't be challenging at the district court level, federal court level, each and every one of these people that we're going to deport, because this is hindering national security. It is undermining a president's ability to keep this country safe. I honestly believe that. And so if this case can serve as an example of, what the criteria and what the bar is, fine, let's do it. But just go in there absolutely prepared to win this.
There's also a point of view that there's a major failure from Columbia University. Someone was laying out that this could have been a lot simpler if Columbia University would have suspended or expelled
Yes.
Khalid, which I believe they did for one day. It was like a 1 day, 24-hour suspension. But if they would have given him a permanent one, he would have lost sort of the qualifications to have a student visa. It would have been a lot easier for the United States to deport him. There again, there's a proceeding going on because he is
Uh, I think we
a
all know
resident.
now that foreign students at Columbia University have become a cash cow, and so there's a lot of resistance. So that's part of the administration to put any stop to that flow of money. Unfortunately, I think Columbia University has a lot to answer for, and they need to be held accountable as well.
Yeah, I think there's a big conversation that's going to be had in that space,
Right.
mostly because I think a lot of people at Columbia are rethinking their actions with the consequences they're not facing. The 400 million is a significant number. It's something that I think they'll be able to live without, but I'm sure they had a lot of plans when it came to that. Also, I would say they have been the center of this conversation because they were one of the universities with some of the biggest protests. One of the groups CUAD. I'm forgetting the exact sort of name of the student body group, but they held sort of centers or locations on campus where they took over, and they called them essentially anti-Jew free zones. Where in that area, if you were a Jew, you are not allowed to enter
Unbelievable.
into these sections that
That
are
should not be
within the
tolerated.
campus.
That should absolutely not be tolerated.
And
And that's what I mean. I mean, I guess the lesson here is you better not be expressing support for terrorist organizations if you're here on privilege.
100%. This is you touched on this a little bit earlier on El Tren de Aragua. Look, let's go back and remember there was a video that was put out by El Presidente del Salvador, Bukele, on the images of these gang members arriving on the plane, being taken out of the plane, being put into the jail, their heads shaved, roll call being taken. It was reshared by Donald Trump, the White House, and several other news outlets. There are many people who are seeing this and are saying that this is a clear message that the administration is not playing around. They were one of the gangs that the president said they were going to target. It is also one of the gangs that the administration has declared a terrorist organization, along with MS-13 and then several cartels in Mexico. We covered this in one of these shows earlier. However, there is a judge who verbally and then later on put out an order asking for a halt on these. Trump said these planes were already landing in El Salvador. Bukele, I think, tweeted out saying it's too late. For those who have concerns in this space, you touched upon this a little bit earlier, but what's your point of view on those who say there's a concern of either due process or there's concerns of these individuals sort of maybe not having their day in court, and now they're in another country, not their home country, but a country like El Salvador?
Well, I mean, first, they're here illegally. They're deportable. Second, they're criminals. They've committed crimes while in America. They violated our rules of conduct. You perpetrated harm and injury against Americans or property of Americans. So you should be expelled. I do worry about due process. Fine. I mean, let's just put it out there. The reason why people come to America is because of the rule of law, right? It's because everybody has their day in court. I don't know what to make of 200 criminals who cross the border illegally, um, and a judge has to see each and every one of them because ACLU now is gonna, for whatever reason, to oppose Trump and block every one of his actions. Is this what's going to happen now? Are we going to stall or prolong the deportation of criminals who are here without authorization? I guess I just have an instinctual resistance to that, to support that kind of action. If, for example, Trump has to now prove that these folks were criminals that actually had antecedentes criminales or committed crimes in the US, and they are still here without authorization and has to return them, that still doesn't make sense to me. So I'm at a loss as to what the remedy here is. Maybe you have an answer, Wadi.
I wish I did. I wish I did. I will say is I do have my concerns are in the same breath. I both think it is great that these individuals, because I'll be honest with you, I'm very familiar with what the Tren de Aragua did in Colorado, where I saw the videos of them with
Violent.
very heavily armed going into people's apartments, many of them Hispanic, many of
Yeah.
them, just people from all any parts of Denver or parts of the United States, but going into their apartments and like just robbing individuals at gunpoint, families with kids, hardworking neighbors, and I mean at gunpoint. This is not just like breaking in when you're not at home. These are dangerous folks. My first reaction was one, I think this is good, but then I wanted to learn more. I googled El Tren de Aragua, the origin, and a little bit of what is it, how that they act, and the level of stuff. A lot of the information is one what they've done in the U.S., but also a lot of what they've done in Venezuela. Everything from kidnapping, racketeering. I mean, a level of extortion to businesses, to their fellow citizens, and we're seeing those same patterns here in the United States. So I think that the message has to be sent clear that these individuals are not welcome. I live in Miami. I know so many Venezuelans who disavow them completely. They came, many of them, to the United States to flee neighborhoods where El Tren de Aragua had completely taken over. So they didn't come to the United States just so these people can have their way here in our country as well. So this is not just like the United States and Americans saying this against this one group. La misma
Yeah.
gente de Venezuela are against it.
Can the UCLA or these UCLA, the ACLU, or these left of center woke organizations who I guess truly care about all immigrants, even the criminals, why don't you pick cases where somebody who didn't commit a crime, who hardworking, established family man or member, was unjustifiably picked up, with no cause and sent back, or whatever. Why do you have to pick Tren de Aragua to defend? Why do you have to pick these criminals who are being flown back to really receive some sort of justice even? I'm glad they're in Bukele's prison. Maybe they can learn a lesson. Stop committing crimes.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to do it in America any longer. But that's who they choose to defend. And then I just kind of find that revolting. I'm just, God dang it. Can't you just wait for again, the sad case, the real cases of injustice? Because apparently there's a lot out there. Anyways.
Yeah, what I was going to add though is in the same breath, that there is a level of acknowledgement that this is good is there are nuances to this. And when the order was said, the White House is being very careful on their messaging. It sounds like they were aware of the verbal order, but they're tying themselves that the written order didn't come in. They didn't receive that until later. There are a lot of things that I think the Trump administration is doing very quickly and I think purposely, in order to be able to not have to deal with some of these legal ratifications. I think a
I'll
lot
be
of things.
honest with you. I'm fascinated by this stalemate between the executive and the judicial. I'm actually frustrated with the judicial and that they have to intervene in everything that Trump does. Can Trump even go to the bathroom without asking permission from a judge now? It is getting crazy. On every executive action that Trump is taking, there's a judge waiting to stop him. It's getting ridiculous to the point where I think they're starting to undermine the trust of the American people in the judicial branch. There's a lot of trust in the judicial branch, I'll have to say. And it used to be when a Supreme Court decides on something, it was hard and fast. Because you're starting to abuse that and meddle into every executive action, people are starting to wonder what the hell is going on here. It's like you have your own ideological agenda to be pushing here that goes against the president. There's a political remedy to a president who does decisions that the American public doesn't like. You vote him out, or you change parties. We're not here waiting on the judicial branch to resolve our issues with the president. So I'm waiting to see how this plays out. I'm not saying I'm taking sides of the judiciary branch or over the executive, but I've never seen the courts meddle as much as they are during this time that since Trump became president. It's not normal.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it plays out as well. I think the concern that some people have, and you gave one point of view,
I get the concerns.
The other point of view is like
political.
How much is he going sort of to the point of crossing the line or not crossing the line on some of these legalities? It does seem like there's a hyper.
But again, Wadi, on every action that he's taken, there's judicial blocks. I mean, at what point does the president just get to act on his responsibilities without judicial intervention? He has the role of the executive. He gets to make decisions with wide latitude on these things. But to nitpick him on everything is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, I do find it interesting. I think I'm curious to see how it plays out. Obviously, on the Biden side, when he did a lot of stuff, there weren't as many judicial sort of rulings.
Even close.
The most famous one was on him trying to get rid of student loan debt through mechanisms that just did not up. The courts stood saying that this could not move forward. But that's one example when we're seeing in the first 50 to 60 days, several ones in very significant actions that the president has taken. So I'm curious to see how it plays out. There has to be a time where somehow we're able to bring back trust in our institutions. I think it's something that separates the U.S. From Latin America. Charlie Kirk was making the case that one of the reasons that Democrats have really lost support is by how much they stand by the institutions at the federal government side, where yes, the older generation is sort of taking advantage of what they saw were many prosperous years, and this next generation, research has shown, is not doing as well as the previous generation. So this new generation of young voters, which Trump did, I think he was 13% the dial, they're hearing Democrats defend these institutions, and they're saying that's not it. They have failed us in this way. There's a lack of trust growing towards those institutions.
Lack of trust, maybe because of what happened to Donald Trump in 2024, how intense the lawfare was, right? Where attorney generals, even county prosecutors at the county level, local prosecutors, federal prosecutors, all rained down on Donald Trump, to prevent him from winning the presidency. And there were flimsy charges or trumped up, pardon the pun, charges fabricated in whole cloth, to try to stop him, especially like the one in New York, which was just crazy. But the point is, people saw right through that, right? And that the machine of the judicial system was being manipulated and used by these power players to try to stop a political foe. And it's continued now. It looks like, through shopping for judges and using the courts to try to stop an executive executing executive actions. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, you can say he's playing fast and loose with some of the constitutional issues. No, he's well within his rights to do what he's doing. So anyways, like I said, I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. and what John Roberts is going to do in the Supreme Court to try to fend off so much of this judicial meddling at the district level.
Yeah, 100%. Another issue which is likely to receive a lot of attention in the courts is the executive order signed this week officially by Donald Trump when it comes to the Department of Education. A mandate, essentially, an order saying how do we drastically reduce, reform, and eliminate a lot of the areas that we're seeing in the Department of Education. Also, the Wall Street Journal had an explanation on this that I'll read real quick. When it talks about what they see as some of the problems, one is just the amount of bureaucracy and overlaying in the State Department. It says states and school districts must apply for the grants, many of which of them are redundant. And many times the department employees are the ones who get to pick and choose based on arbitrary and often political criteria that often are not related to the student learning. In other words, Congress many times does give grants that go to the State Department, but then the people who get to pick and choose where they go and why they go to there are the bureaucrats. When many times these grants, the Wall Street Journal was saying, do not necessarily have criteria by how or a guidance on how they should allocate it to many of the schools. So it just ends up being these folks in Washington, D.C. That many times get to do that. It says, oh, here, there are also dozens of grants for school for low-income kids, full-service community, but at many times are not actually given to the districts that need it the most. Some of what I've seen of what the sort of process of what they're going to see at the department is how do these funds actually go back to the states who, one, are closer to the needs that specific state needs. Two, also the voter is a lot closer, so they don't like what their governor is doing, what their state legislator is doing, what their school board is doing. It's a lot easier for them every 2 years or 4 years if it's a governor's race to vote people in and out, to have their hands on what's going on. How do you see this? Is this a positive move? Are there any concerns that you have with what we saw this week with this executive order?
Yeah, well, first let me say that the gravest indictment on unions, school unions, on school administrators, and these bureaucrats that you're referring to are the test scores of our children. We are actually progressively getting worse, even though the money is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have is a top-heavy system, and a system that protects itself, that defends itself. It doesn't like change. It wants to grow power and control. It wants to usurp the role of the parents in the education of their children. We're seeing that, like in the state of Illinois, which just passed a law, this crazy law, that is going to take rights away from parents, where basically you now have to detail every bit of what happens if you're going to choose to homeschool, and register and basically become a public school, or an arm of the public school system. And the reason you homeschool is to get away from that.
Yeah.
And so anyways, the point is, these people have done a horrible job in general. There are, of course, exceptions to the rule. But what we're talking about here is not doing away with education or harming education. So what can we do to improve it, right? And a lot of that is get this top-heavy system off our backs, that is hindering the quality of an education for children to receive a quality education. And so let's get the money straight to the school districts, so they are able to spend it, I think, in a way that they can use better judgment, as opposed to this conditional money that comes from the feds, and it comes with all these strings attached. And a lot of the times it goes against the values of parents in the local schools. But they've been playing politics for too long with taxpayer money. Enough of that. This is again a more efficient system, a more efficient way of doing things. And I think it's high time that we did away with the Department of Education. It has not proved its existence matters.
Dan, you gave the example in Illinois of sort of bad policy, but in your home state of Texas, there's examples of good policy that's making its way through the legislature I think just a week ago there was a group of activists going into the state legislature talking about the need of passing one of these bills. What do you know about what's going on in the space of education, educational opportunities in Texas? What is this bill? What's the benefit? What are the pros and cons there?
Yeah, let me preface it by saying that the fight for school choice in Texas has been going on for almost 30 years now. In fact, I gave remarks at the steps of the Capitol in Austin 15 years ago in support of school choice, and 15 years later, this year, HB3 is going to pass. We have the political support. We have the numbers, both in the House and the Senate side of the Texas legislature. And so we're excited. It's not as big as we want it to be, but it is open to all Texans, but it is capped, right? It's limited. And hopefully very soon we can have universal, school choice for all kids. But this is a big first step in providing parents a choice. You're right. There are schools that are working, that are doing very well, but there are schools that are failing our kids, and the parents should have a choice to take their money, their own money, taxpayer money, and tie it to the child, and choose the school of their choosing. And that is unique to the needs of the child. Whatever the parent in their judgment feels that is. And so in Texas, bravo, hopefully within a week or two, we should have school choice as the law of the land.
Yeah, that's good news for Texas families and students all across the state. Well, folks, there you have it. That has been our show today. Garza, Gaitan, and the game. Make sure to subscribe. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and X, as well as Spotify. So make sure to stay connected. Tune in as we come next week with another episode of the show. And we'll be back here with Garza and Gaitan. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Go Gonzaga.
Let's go, Maryland.